Hello, everybody. This is ScottiesTech.Info, technically Tech Talk with Scotty Antonio. I'm Scotty. This is my co-host Cletus the Tribble, and there is, of course, my Mexican tech bro co-host Tonio.
Hello, everyone.
What's going on?
What's going on?
So this week, there were a couple stories that obviously the Palantir thing, that's huge, and that's what we're going to talk about ultimately. But there were a couple things that sort of slapped me in the face like a fish. It's there seems to be there are official narrative. Basically, insanity has taken over the tech world. That's probably the simplest way to put it. Like, for example, everyone knows AI is super popular, right? All we hear about is AI, and you're all going to lose your jobs because of AI and AI this and AI that. And for AI, we need tons of data centers. And in those data centers, we need tons of servers. And in those servers, we need tons of RAM chips. So even though the RAM that's used in data center servers is different from the RAM that goes in your PC, for example, or your smartphone, the price of all RAM has gone up like 3 to 4 times compared to 1 year ago even. And the common narrative is, well, it's because AI needs so much RAM that the price has gone up. And everyone kind of goes along with this. And there's an article. So here's this article on techspot.com, and it's entitled AI Boom Drives SK Hynix to Pay $477,000 Bonus Per Employee.
Yo. Oh, my God.
Now, okay, like, you can read this article and it's fascinating, but the gist of it is SK Hynix, they make DRAM, the chips that go in like RAM modules, right? And also smartphones and tablets and whatever gizmo you can think of. SK Hynix has 35,000 employees, and each worker is expected to receive an average of $477,000 in a bonus because Hynix, a RAM chip maker, is making so much money. But the crazy thing is this little sentence right here. This comes on top of the $95,000 in profit-sharing bonuses the company has already paid to each employee.
Wow.
So let me get this straight. They've got 35,000 employees, and they're already doing so well that each employee gets 95 grand, right?
Yeah.
That's like kind of, I mean, okay, if you have profit sharing, it's a great way to motivate employees and whatever.
Yeah.
But they're getting $95,000 each, all 35,000 of them. And that's like an average. So some get more, some get less. Okay, whatever. And if that's all that was happening, you'd go, okay, well, RAM is popular, people need RAM, they're a profitable company, profit sharing is good. Okay. But no, that's not enough. They're not each getting an average of $100,000 in bonus each. They're actually getting an additional almost $500,000 each.
Yeah.
So where did that money come from? Now, the interesting thing is that Samsung, which also makes DRAM chips, their employees were protesting because they want their percentage raised so that they have a matching bonus so that blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Which means Samsung is also profiting handsomely on its DRAM business.
Yeah.
So let's pause here for a minute and think about this, because I built a computer for someone recently, and the RAM, 32, I think it was 32 gigs of RAM, which would have cost maybe like 150, maybe 200 euros like a year ago, I think it was 654 euros just for the RAM.
Wow.
Now,
insane.
If DRAM companies are making so much money that they can afford to pay employees that much in bonuses, then obviously the hike in prices is not simply due to AI. The hike in prices is due to greed.
Yeah.
So we have like these kind of narratives, and everyone is sort of accepting of these narratives, but you read an article like this and you know that they're BSing you. You know that it's not true. Another narrative that we're hearing a lot is AI is going to steal all of our jobs. Now, I had a fascinating conversation the other day with my buddy Adam, who's also a techie, and he said one of his relations, she got fired from her job, and she was sure that it was AI. And he said something really interesting. He used an analogy, and of course, I'm an engineer and a techie. I like analogies because they're useful to help understand things. So he says, it's kind of like back when automobiles were introduced. Everybody said cars are horrible. Automobiles they're gonna ruin everything. Everyone's gonna be out of a job. Think about all the jobs. Look, you got people who raise horses. You've got people who train horses. You've got people who make saddles and all the, I don't know, the tack or whatever they call it, all the stuff that makes the horses go and connects you to the carriage, You've got people who make carriage wheels. You've got the upholsterers. You've got woodworkers. All these people are going to be out of jobs. And yet the reality is, and that was true. I mean, you don't need tons and tons of people like raising and training horses anymore, for example, because hardly anybody has a horse, right? But the car came along and literally changed everything where, for example, you are no longer limited to a tiny geographical area where you can get a job because more and more people have cars, transportation improved, roads improved, and all sorts of jobs were created. Like to build a modern car, you have a phenomenal amount of stuff that you need to build, and many, many jobs were actually created. So that kind of made me go, yeah. I mean, it is true, according to many, obviously, mainstream articles that we read, that, like I just read something this morning, and they say Goldman Sachs, they have AI now, and this AI can do the work of like 5 programmers. So they laid off a bunch of people, and all these companies are laying people off left and right, and so on and so forth. And the thing is, Facebook is a good example. I'll give you that example. Facebook is supposedly going to lay off more people.
Yeah.
And everyone, you read the news article, it says, yeah, because of AI. And then I went, wait a minute, like, isn't Facebook the company, Meta? Aren't they the company who, as a social media site, like it sucks horribly now. It's not even a real social media site anymore. Then they came up with their idea a couple of years ago of virtual reality and the headset. And this is the future. You're going to have an avatar, and it's our wonderful new idea. It totally fell flat on its face. Now they have, I think it's the 2nd generation of their AI glasses, Ray-Ban and another brand of the glasses with little cameras up here, and you can, it's connected to AI, and it's going to be magical. Mark Zuckerberg has been sucking up to China for like ages now. He's been trying to get into the Chinese market because it's a lot of people. It's big. They don't let him. He wanted to buy a Chinese AI company. They blocked the deal.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, Facebook is I mean, I know in terms of like the numbers, it appears that they're doing very well. But objectively, like when I look at them, all I see is like failure after failure. And in fact, the guy who made the movie the Big Short, what's his name? What's his name? Michael Burry, I think. Michael Burry. He came out and he said, yeah, AI is a giant bubble. And in fact, in his opinion, most American tech companies are seriously overvalued.
Yeah.
Which actually also relates to Palantir, which we'll get to in a minute. But it seems to me that we have this situation where there's a lot of stuff you hear, except when you look at it, you go, this is like, it's hype, but I think even more than that, it's utter insanity. It's like no one wants AI, but they're building data centers and ruining people's neighborhoods and using the water, and electricity prices go up and RAM prices go up, and it's actually nuts.
Yeah, it is.
Which brings us to, speaking of nuts, That brings us to Palantir.
Oh, uh-oh.
That was like I fell off my chair. Well, I half fell off my chair because I knew they were crazy. But
Yeah.
so what's the deal with Palantir?
What's the deal with Palantir? Well, it's a couple of things. Well, I mean, it's a relatively opaque company, right? Of course, we understand that the contracts are public information, at least the government contracts. So they've been having huge contracts as of late with the farmers and with car manufacturers and so on and so forth. But what's making the rounds is, two things. The first one is, of course, that now we have more information about their flagship software as a service, which is Maven AI, right? And the second one is the summary of this book by the CEO, Alex Karp. The book was published, I think, around a year ago, perhaps February 2025. But then Palantir published a summary, a 22-point summary, where, well, I guess it defines the vision that, not only Alex Karp, but also Peter Thiel have about the future of the industry, the role that the tech companies must have, and the vision of the society that we will be living in, perhaps. Also, it contains valid criticism for Silicon Valley, right? I mean, basically, he's saying Silicon Valley's been living off the gravy train for so long that it is not contributing to the national security apparatus, essentially, right? Which is crazy because then it is so easy to read between the lines, saying that, well, this is a government a contractor, I mean, a government military contractor that it has the purpose of providing software, and in this case AI, with the intention of the usage in the military sphere. Well, if we read the manifesto here, it seems that not only we are it's been labeled as techno-fascism. In a way, it is true. Another read could be that they are getting ready for war, or more war, perpetual war, perhaps, and because it is so focused on the fact that the tech companies and the government need to come together and form this alliance that will propel the national security that it is there. I mean, there is little room for other interpretation, because it seems like it's going to be, they're preparing for the future, and the future is, in words of this guy, is that they will use AI as deterrence instead of nuclear capacities, nuclear weapons, right? So,
Yeah.
in a way, he's saying AI is going to be like a nuclear weapon. It's fascinating.
Which is actually kind of funny, because that was the point where they say hard power doesn't matter. It's soft power, in the form of software.
Yeah.
And you're going, right, AI. But
exactly.
At the same time, around the world, you have countries who are not the United States developing, for example, hypersonic weapons, which some of those are actually technologically very impressive, and in terms of what they are capable of doing, not good at all. So I hesitate to agree with the statement that soft power in the form of software is going to save us, because that to me is like literal crazy talk. I mean, confronted with the reality, speaking of hype and talking nonsense, but they seem to believe every word of it, which is somewhat frightening.
Oh yeah, they're super invested in this vision. Absolutely. The other point is around this super system, right? Maven AI, or just Maven, right? Which is, you remember that Enemy of the State movie from the 90s with, I think it was Will Smith. So where, this suspect was chased around across a city, and it was always, a camera was pointing at him at all time. Well, it sounds like that a little bit, right? In the sense that it is omniscient type of technology that can, make decisions in real time, but essentially is from a wide variety of input, meaning satellite imagery or video or drone footage or sensors and all types of radars, all types of sources. They will just ingest this huge amount of information, and then with a few clicks make decisions upon an evaluation, which is an AI evaluation of whether it is a friend or a foe, whether it is a target, what type of target you can, sort of follow. If you want to pinpoint like a vehicle or a chip or something, then you can do so, and data around that gets evaluated, and then you can even have evaluation on the best weapon to target said object, and then just make it happen, right? So the promise is, as with the other promises from AI, is instead of employing 2,000 people just to try to crunch off all this data, you will have only 20 people, and the AI will get you almost to the door, and then the human will just press the button or perform the clicks on the mouse, and then something will happen, right? In this case,
so we don't need to have a military draft, because we're not going to need hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The techno future is so awesome that just like 20 people can run the whole thing.
Yeah, apparently.
Sure.
They can, plan this. It's not only about reactive situations, right? Where there's a threat or something. They can also sort of plan ahead and evaluate the pros and cons, and then like a sort of, it's aiding the military analysts just to, all right, what is the best course of action? Now, the interesting part is that that also, the investments they have done on this thing in the US are huge, and each year they add billions of dollars to this thing. And now NATO, right, in Europe are also using that. I think it's France and the UK and Germany. They are on board on using this thing as well. And of course, that implies two things. One is that it's being used on actual war, meaning that the Iran situation, it's being used there. And also, I assume, because I haven't seen much, but I assume that in Ukraine also it's happening. And then you can think that in other conflicts around the world. And the second part that implies is that it requires a perpetual type of machine or a war machine going on, always having these conflicts for it to become better with more and more data. Right?
Yeah.
So in that regard, you will say, all right, if they have admitted at least that in Iran it's been used, then you will, you will hear that operation or that war or however you may want to call it, it's been wholly successful. But then we have conflicting information, and then you will say, well, was it really, really like super efficient and super, successful? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But it's interesting either way.
Maybe the chances are that there's a lot of hype going on there too.
Oh yeah.
Because and the interesting thing about Palantir is, this manifesto came out, and I'm thinking about it, and I go, hang on a minute. Palantir is a company that started in 2003. And I'm pretty sure it was like 2022 or something before it was actually profitable. In any case, roughly 20 years.
Yeah.
It took roughly 20 years for Palantir to actually make a profit, and they were essentially funded by In-Q-Tel, which is the American intelligence agency's venture capitalist firm that everyone knows, but no one is supposed to talk about it or say it out loud because you'll be accused of being a conspiracy theorist, but everyone knows it's true.
Yeah.
They're an In-Q-Tel baby, and they didn't make a profit for 20 years. Nevertheless, today they're this huge, super powerful. They've got contracts with governments and police agencies and intelligence agencies, and they keep saying like, but we don't collect your data.
Oh.
We're just the ones who process it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just have to really wonder about, because that's a common theme with all, like even with just normal AI. A company doesn't have to make a profit anymore. Or if you want to build electric cars, you just get subsidies from governments, and it's like insanity piled upon insanity.
Mm-hmm. It's like these companies struggle to survive until they found a purpose, and then they were propelled exactly to the front and center. In this world stage now, and apparently, because in reality AI, it's been here for a while, but not decades. I mean, the research could have been, but the application finally, we are seeing it ramp up in the last couple of years, 3-4 years at most, right? So that means that these other companies had to be doing something else. I know in the sense, Palantir was probably just a tech company in the traditional sense that was serving, of course, the military and also the government. And then they, of course, they took AI as their, ethos, let's say, and now they have been front and center of every initiative, because along with the AI race is, of course, the AI greed, which is just is the gold rush of this time, and it doesn't seem that it's going to stop anytime soon. As we discussed last time, I mean, the budgets allocated for research or for investing in chips and in DRAM and all about the infrastructure are just huge, and they are doubling every year, right? So that means that they are all in on this technology. They really, they have been putting all of the the eggs in this one basket.
Yeah.
And there is no other option but to weaponize AI. At least from the Palantir point of view, they will weaponize AI, and you have to think, all right, so that sounds like they are going out there, and in a war scenario they will gather all this information and process it, and then present the analysts with the information. But what about internally, in the US or elsewhere, because the input of information is, the devices are there, thousands upon thousands of cameras are found everywhere. So I see that it is not impossible, right, to have Palantir, wanting to have access to this video feed and footage and images within the US and elsewhere, and provide the same type of intel.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I sort of see it both ways, because on the one hand, obviously, Ed Snowden came out with certain revelations, and that was many, many years ago. And like, if you think that all that has come to a screeching halt, like, well, I got news for you. Obviously, the bad guys, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, they have fascinating plans for all of us. Like, for example, 15-minute cities and blah blah blah. And of course, much of this involves this AI and so on and so forth. But then at the same time, I'm going, well, hang on a minute. It really also looks to me like all of these tech companies, it's like how could you invest all this money in a technology that isn't actually super good? Like, for example, there was back in like November 2025, Apple published a paper and they said you have large language models and then you have large reasoning models. And the reasoning models, large language models, your AI chatbots, everybody knows, they hallucinate, they try to make you happy, whatever. You can play with them and maybe get them to work a little bit better, but right. A large reasoning model, an LRM, is the kind where it actually walks you through the steps and it says, this and then that and then that. And so supposedly it's supposed to be better at thinking logically and solving problems. Yeah. So Apple released this paper in November 2025 showing that the more complex a problem you give it, either LLMs or LRMs, at some level of complexity, all AI fails. It gets 0% correct answers. And they use like the Tower of Hanoi, like a simple puzzle type thing. And then there was a rebuttal to it. And the rebuttal said, no, Apple, you were stupid. You did this wrong and that wrong. And the initial paper was wrong in specific ways, but somebody else came out and did like another experiment that compensated for that. And basically Apple was sort of vindicated that, like, yes, all of our modern AIs, you give them a simple problem and they do well. You give them a medium complexity problem and the LRMs do a better job. You give them an actual complex problem, the kind of problem that humans are adept at solving, especially humans working together.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an idea.
Yeah.
They all fall flat on their face. They just get it totally wrong. And this was kind of interesting to me because I started thinking about Apple. And I'm going, Apple recently announced that they more or less stopped their Siri AI development. And they said, hey, we're just going to use Google's Gemini. And at roughly the same time, they introduced this little thing called the MacBook Neo, which is a $500 laptop. This is Apple, the company, Steve Jobs, who for decades said, Apple can't produce an inexpensive computer or phone or whatever because Apple is a premium brand and it's premium quality and it's the integration between hardware and software. And like, this is why we will never sell a cheap device. And at the same time, they basically said, this AI stuff, it's whatever. We'll just use Google Gemini for now. They're basically kind of like not passing the buck, but they're sort of it's like if they invest billions in AI and the bubble bursts, they're screwed. But if they let somebody else invest billions in AI and the bubble bursts, they're fine. And in the meantime, they've just sold their first ever laptop that directly appeals to the mainstream. That's us. Us who food prices are up, fuel prices are up, RAM prices are up, everything costs more money. And so I thought that was also kind of interesting. It's like, so there's like a lot of hype. And I think a lot of people know that it's mostly hype. And the CEOs are just madly pushing. It's almost like as everything falls apart, they just go, well, let's just push this AI thing because we can make a ton of money. Our stock options will skyrocket. And it's like the last hurrah for them, the last bit of like greed before like the whole system collapses or something. Because otherwise, like to me, it just doesn't make any sense, like why they're doing all this. Because it's But go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking what you're saying, right? from a product perspective, that's what Steve Jobs always focused on the experience and how easy it is to use something, a device, and all of that. Always thinking in having good products that, as their modus operandi, right? As their way of being, even, right? So in that sense, if you have in AI this promise, what we've seen has been impressive to some degree. Of course, I mean, I think that just a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, just using ChatGPT felt like magic, right? And that's in a way how Apple wanted to promote their own. There is the magic trackpad and the magic mouse. They have attached that sort of idea to their products. Is fascinating, right? So if from a product person perspective, right, someone focused on the usability and how things work, or how things are, making people's life easier, AI is very promising, right? But what we have in Apple is Tim Cook. Well, he's leaving the company and he's leaving for the hardware guy. I think he was, right? Tim Cook is not a product guy. Tim Cook is a logistics guy. So it makes absolute sense now that he may be a little bit reluctant or skeptical about AI, right? And that's why he's I guess his last product from a logistical perspective is a perfectly good piece of hardware that it is also super cheap.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, but if we had a product guy at Apple, we may have seen already a super good version of Siri, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. So, yeah. I think, I don't know, but I look at tech as a whole and I see all this craziness, and it's like, I mean, there's obviously a ton of greed.
Yeah.
Greed is driving many things. And of course, none of this stuff that's happening in the tech world is separate from what's going on economically, culturally, socially. There are, obvious conflicts happening around the world. I mean, there was the green agenda, which was another just pile of nonsense. And even the unelected head of the EU, von der Leyen, came out and said, yeah, we got rid of all the nuclear power plants in Europe, and not all of them, but many of them. That was maybe not a good idea. We're going to open them all up again in the next 5 years. No. And you're going like, wait, you took 15 years to close all these nuke plants, and now, thank goodness, France kept all of theirs. So
yeah.
But does that even matter? Because the Strait of Hormuz and what's happening in Iran, and if you have no petroleum, you have no plastics, you have no medical supplies, you have no, you have no fertilizer, you have no food, you have, like, the entire globalized integrated system literally falls apart. And while all of this is going on and so much more, all these people can do is go, more AI, more AI.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And you're going like, right, people are losing their jobs because the economy is kind of not doing so well, but you're not allowed to say that, because you just turn on the evening news like you used to, or read the internet, and it'll tell you the economy is strong and we're winning in Iran, and and yet everyone knows that that's not the case, and that it's things appear to be going rather pear-shaped.
Yeah. Now that you mention Europe, who's behind in AI and even in data centers? It's Europe, right? The data centers are being built, of course, in the US. It's the primary location. Then, of course, there's China. But as the sources of energy are being crippled in Europe, there is no way that Europe can catch up with any of that technology.
And so go ahead.
Yeah. And I was thinking, well, okay, so it seems that it's the contrast of having this bright future with AI, right, and pushing so hard on all levels, policy levels and budgeting and investing heavily on all of this and the infrastructure and the AI race at in the tech companies and all of that. That speaks of a future that it is almost there, almost here, right? But on the other hand, we have the threat of a global war and a famine, even because the fertilizers are not coming through from the strait, and we also have the gas prices and all of that. So the contrast between the promise of the future and the stark and dark reality of the conflicts nowadays, it's fascinating just to see that.
Yeah. And yeah, there was even the other news story the other day where European industry is in deep doo-doo because they don't have cheap gas from Russia anymore. They've been buying it from America at 3 to 4 times the price. And so, of course, especially in Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse, it's doing really bad. Businesses crashing and closing like mad. Yeah. And so the solution for Volkswagen was they were going to possibly take one of their car manufacturing plants and use it to build weapons.
Yeah.
And you go, I'm sorry, you don't have the raw materials, you don't have the energy to build cars. So where are you going to get both of those to build weapons? Don't worry, we'll ask AI where to get it from? Or it's like, yeah, it's like the level of crazy is like way off the charts.
Yeah, way off the charts. Yeah.
And I think I think it's going to be very interesting to see like where all this goes. Strangely enough, I'm actually optimistic because like
really?
Because like look at the Palantir thing.
Yeah.
That tweet, it had thousands and thousands of comments of people just ripping them to shreds.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, great. Now what happens next? Well, we'll see. But
it's the disconnect between. The disconnect in we are living in different realities at this point.
Yeah.
Where the tech bros, right? they are foreseeing, even Elon, right, with his Mars colonization project, they are looking at the future, but the reality as it is right now and as it will be in the near future is very different. But they are like, they prefer to look into the future in that way and just ignore whatever is happening. That's where this disconnect comes from, and I'm not surprised in the least that those tweets just got called out by almost everyone. The ratio must have been enormous, right?
And that's, I think, I don't know why I'm so optimistic. I should probably be hiding under my bed or something, but maybe it's because there are so many people who like on the Palantir tweet, speaking out about stuff. But I think, it's like I'm here in Europe and I'm going like, geez, fuel for the car is expensive. Fuel for the boiler is expensive. Food prices are going up. Well, at least the chocolate section at the local grocery store is looking a little bit sparse. And of course, they're talking about, food shortages potentially and blah, blah, blah. And we'll have to wait and see where it all goes. But even people talk about like, well, inflation could set in because, it effectively already has in like RAM prices, for example. And the currency could weaken and all this stuff could happen. But at the same time, you have many companies in China producing electric cars, like using AI to design like new aluminum alloys in like a super newfangled way to build an electric car that's half the price. And like I could very easily see, instead of just buying everything that's designed in the West and made in China, it's designed in China and made in China. And oh, don't worry that you have a shortage of whatever blenders. We'll sell you this new blender that we designed and built at half the price.
Yeah.
And of course, we're still making more. The powers that be still make their money, but we still have our blenders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason why I thought the Apple thing with like the getting out and kind of distancing themselves a bit from AI and going to the mass market, the average Joe who needs a simple laptop that's powerful. And that MacBook Neo, from everything I've seen, is like a pretty awesome machine.
Yeah. I've seen it too.
That's, to me, that's the act of a company that's actually. I'm not a super Apple fan. I've never owned a Mac computer. I have an iPad, but like that's the act of a company that really sees the writing on the wall, and they're going like, no, we want to survive this. So how are we going to do that? Here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting result, because the sort of luxury computing device company is now trying to appeal to the masses. And well, doesn't that mean we're all going to get like better computers? Because I'm kind of sick of my Windows 11 crashing all the time. I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
So there's, I mean, war would obviously, that would be bad. But I don't know.
Yes.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I have to say, I was quite heartened by the sheer number of just super nasty comments on that Palantir.
Oh yeah. It was glorious, right?
That was beautiful.
It was fantastic. I mean, it's in a way, it's looking down at the at people. You know, oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, and it's so that really doesn't sit well with anyone, right? But in specifically coming from this particular tech company, right, which could be helping in war crimes even right? So that doesn't really, I mean, because they have this vested interest in militarizing society, which is in a way what Germany is doing, or they have plans for that as well. So it's like we are instinctively looking at the writing on the wall, and understanding that hard times may be coming in the future, and that and they want to super optimize everything, meaning that the less people we employ to achieve whatever we want, the better. So that cannot sit well. I mean, not that it's just the fact of this hyper optimization, on top of a defense contractor or an industry or a defense industry, is the fact that they want to get rid of people that doesn't really sit well with anyone. I don't know. I find it very pleasing to just go over the comments on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but it sure is interesting to watch. And at some point, just like with the AI bubble, there's like reality, and then there's the nonsense, and it's like everyone can see that. Right. There's a disconnect.
There is a disconnect.
And we need to reconnect the things that are disconnected, because without doing that, like, prices keep going up, and I mean, things are already bad for many people I know, like, prices are high and blah blah blah. Right. How bad will it get? Well, we don't know. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be painful. The bubble will burst. There will probably be an economic downturn. Things will get expensive, and so on. But the worst plans that they're 15-minute cities and like all that is like, it's kind of like, we're going to do green energy. We're going to do the Internet of Things. Well, that fell flat on its face. That never happened. We're going to do green energy. Well, that fell on its face. I mean,
Yeah.
to an extent, like now you have, some countries like China who did green energy very, very intelligently. And for them, it's actually pretty much a success. But yeah, ultimately, it comes down to, I think, again, I keep coming back to this. There is a shift from west to east.
Yeah.
Mark my words. And 10 years from now, like your computer will probably be designed and built, including the microprocessor. It will probably all come from China.
Yeah. Well, it almost is like that right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. The only difference is that instead of some company in California designing it, it's like a company in Zhongguancun, whatever the Chinese Silicon Valley will do it. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff they're doing with AI, the Xiaomi's electric car,
Yeah.
I keep reading this stuff and it's like, my God, you people are actually innovating like mad. And everybody makes like nasty comments like, the Chinese don't know how to do anything. They just steal all their technology. And I'm like, no, they don't.
Yeah. Well, not anymore. I mean, if they did in the past, well, they probably did, right?
Well,
But not anymore.
the funny thing is that everyone steals everyone's
Oh yeah.
technology. Like
Oh yeah.
American companies, like there's it's like corporate espionage, and like engineers are like smuggling like blueprints on a USB stick and selling them to this other company, and like all that kind of stuff happens all the time. And they're like, yeah, but I don't like it when the Chinese do it. I'm like,
yeah, exactly. So yeah, probably the future is just a teenager in his bedroom designing his own chips for the purpose that for some very specific purpose.
yeah,
3D printed right there on his bedroom, and just creating this fantastic hardware and software to solve whatever he wants. Right? I don't know.
and actually, hard times are not necessarily bad because everyone says no, I want good times. And historically, hard times are usually what motivates someone to do something awesome.
Oh yeah.
Out of necessity, instead of having these wonderful, comfortable lives, which of course we all want. Times get tough.
Oh yeah.
And when that happens, that's a great motivator, and that's often when certain technological breakthroughs happen. So
some say that pain can drive innovation, right?
yeah.
So
and hopefully we'll be done at that point with ridiculous tech companies that can exist for 20 years without making a profit. It's the new economy. I'm like,
yeah, that's insane, man. I mean, imagine talking to your grandfather, right, and saying, in the future, companies will go for 20 years without making a single cent in profits,
and their stock will be sky high. They'll have an IPO, and the company will be worth like 900 billion overnight. Like they'd look at you like you had 7 heads. They'd be like, "That's impossible. That will never happen." Like that's what we're seeing every day.
Yeah.
And you're going, yeah. So anyway, have we done it to death?
I think so.
I think we've yeah. So we'll keep an eye on things, and because lately, there've been a lot of articles coming up and a lot of stuff and a lot of people saying interesting things. So stay tuned for more fascinating tech talk.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
All right.
Well, for more techie tips, see ScottiesTech.Info. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you, everyone.